Thank you very much, Anne, and thank you everybody for having me. As she just said, my name is Annette Dortmund. I'm Senior Product Manager from OCLC, and I'm very happy to talk not only here at this conference, but directly after Julie, because she has given such a rich picture of what all of this space of next-gen metadata is about, that I'm really happy to now take a step back and talk a little bit more about the theoretical, you might also say research-related side of things. So let's look at what's happening there, what's making this so complex and what we can do, but also what the challenges are from a, oops. So what I'm going to talk about here and what I was asked to talk about is based on a report that was published by OCLC Research in 2020. It's called Transitioning to the Next Generation of Metadata. And if you've got the list that Julie presented of all the different types of data in mind, I mean, that's exactly what we're talking about here. Not just linked data, but the next generation of metadata and linked data as part of that. This report, if you haven't read it yet, you should. It's really accessible via that URL, and it's really foundational. It was authored by my then colleague, Karen Smith-Yoshimura, but it's based on 5 years worth of discussion among metadata managers as part of the OCLC Research Library Partnership. And what they came up with are these 4 key trends that shape this transition to next generation metadata. So clearly there is a transition to linked data and identifiers, and we'll hear a lot about this today. There is also a transition to this managing facilitator collections, so that what Julie mentioned when she talked about e-journals, e-books that are licensed by the library, but where the metadata comes from the outside, but then also the inside-out collection, and that's all the other work basically on collections that are created inside the library. These are terms coined by our former Vice President of Strategy, Lorcan Dempsey. Then an evolution as metadata as a service, and this is an aspect I can't go into details here today. And then finally, what does all of this mean for the professional development of our staff? And that's a tricky question, as we'll see. Is this thing at all? Could I have the next slide, please? Okay, in short, and I don't know why this is not readable. Is there another click that we can try, or doesn't this work? In short, the metadata could be better, there is not enough of it, and the metadata that does exist is not used widely outside the library domain. So that is one of the conclusions this group came up with. And I'll try again. Okay. Now I'm getting the hang of it. Right. Outside the library domain, that is clearly also one of the key things here. And we've heard about this from Julie too. So it just takes a while. I don't know what to do with this. No. Okay, I've got the feeling we're missing a slide, but I'm just continuing here. So basically what I wanted to talk about, and what you can read up in the report if you haven't read it yet, is why is metadata changing, how is it changing, and what are the many influences that create this, what we call a transformative shift. And part of this is that metadata is no longer just created by libraries. As we all know, publishers creating metadata, authors are creating metadata. There is crowdsourcing, and also library metadata is needed much earlier in the process now. So especially if you think about the scholarly record, it's no longer enough to have that metadata at the point of a publication. We basically need the first items of metadata, such as an author identifier, the moment a project starts, long before the publication is even written. And then of course, the last point, yes, metadata can be created by libraries, but it's no longer, but it can also be enhanced by processes, by batch process, and has been for decades now. Now, artificial intelligence can also much easier identify outliers, enhance, enrich. But then again, at the other end of the spectrum, again, we also have crowdsourcing and a lot of knowledge coming into the metadata from there. Okay. This is a slide, basically, you don't need to read all of this. This is also partly to look it up afterwards. And it says mark, if your work is Unimark, it applies exactly the same thing. We created these formats, these library-specific formats decades ago, and they did a good job. Let's be honest about this, they did what they were designed to do. But now the world has changed, and now there are limitations to these formats. And there are collections, and we've just heard a lot about this, where this kind of description, this kind of metadata just doesn't work. Mark doesn't work for certain collections. So this is, we clearly need to move to something else. We need to linkable components, as it says here, and with an emphasis on references. This is also something that we're seeing very often, even for our mark-based tools. It's no longer enough to have a record history per record. We are more and more seeing requirements to say, hey, but why did this field change, and who made the change, and what is it based on, and where does the information come from? So emphasis on references. Well, the whole thing about abbreviations, we know that abbreviations worked well on cataloging cards, but and slightly well in records, but they're not machine readable. And as we just heard, you need to make this data machine readable, to make it accessible, to make it this thing visible, to move forward. And the last bullet point is just saying that in moving forward, we also can try to include other vocabularies than just the one created by libraries. So in other words, this is a strong statement, but it came up by the group. Format-specific metadata management based on curated text strings in bibliographic records understood only by library systems is nearing obsolescence, both conceptually and technically. Now, hoping, do I need, yeah, no. My apologies for this. Shall I just, I'll just wait and hope that it comes up. Basically what this slide is saying, that this report was published in 2020. It's 2 years later now, but these trends are still as true as when they were when Karen published her report. But some of these trends have been accelerated. Clearly, the pandemic has accelerated some of the trends. From the shift from print to digital has also only accelerated the move to open, as we call it, so open access. Etc. And now what we're ending up with, what many libraries are ending up with, is a hybrid situation. So yes, we still have the old work, and as I said, the old work is still important and is there to stay for quite a while. Mark is still needed, Mark still does its job, but increasingly libraries are trying to also enrich these records with, for example, persistent identifiers. There is this shift to open, the shift to digital, but then at the same time, if you look at the last bullet point, analog collections are still very important also in the humanities. So it's not transitioning from the old to a new, but the old, so-called old, is still also relevant and important. Oh my goodness. No. I don't know how to convince this thing. Stay. Yeah. Okay. This is also a trend that we've seen before. No? Okay. One more click and I'll just keep talking. This is also a trend, so the trend to pluralization. Oh my goodness, this word. So diversity, equity, inclusion, to pluralized vocabulary. is also one that has only increased. So we increasingly need to get away from the fixed vocabularies. We need to get away from fixed terminology. We may need community-specific labels. And it's very often linked data is seen as one part of the solution, because there we have this clear separation between the entity we're describing and the label we're using to describe it. I confess that this is a little bit... Okay. Now, the last bullet point is just saying, this is an important point. If we want to do this kind of work, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work to create ethically responsible metadata, to adapt metadata, to work with the communities, to find the right kind of terminologies. And very often it's not just terminologies, sometimes it's also policies, who's allowed to see what, etc. So this takes a lot of work. We want to do this work, but we can only do it if we free up resources elsewhere, and this can only be done by automating, streamlining the mainstream workflows, whatever that is in the future. Has anything been happening? No. Okay, now all of this is happening, so let's just skill up our librarians and get going, right? So it unfortunately is not that easy because this is a moving target. Yes, we still need librarians also in the future. I would argue that can manage, classical mark, that speak mark, and can work on all the classical, everything we've done these decades. But we also need librarians and workers in libraries who have these new skills, who are curious, who are willing to learn, who understand next-gen metadata. We need both of them. And this has gone away again. But the difficult thing is that much of this is learning by doing. There is no fixed line. This is what we need to teach them, and then we're good to go for the next decade. This is really again, the moving target. If we think that 10 years ago we took library management systems to the cloud, it seemed like a big change. But really what we were doing, we were taking known workflows and known requirements and then using a new technology. And yes, in the process, we also tried to create some effect, be more efficient and create some benefits additional. But basically, this is what we did, taking known workflows to another technology. This is different. This is also supporting workflows we can't support today. This is maybe even creating workflows we don't even know about. So maybe the killer workflow is still out there, for all of this. And it also, so this is why this is a big shift and not just a technology change. And this change in workflows also requires a change in mindset and in thinking about this. So if we are no longer creating records, but describing entities, where do we start, but mostly where do we end? And Julie talked a little bit about this, but very simply, if you've got a postcard, what do you describe? What is the metadata you're creating? Are you just describing, this is Chicago and this is this bridge, and or are you also talking about who sent it and to whom and in which context? Are you saying something about how it has survived all these maybe 100 years or something? So where do you stop, where do you end, and how do you make those decisions? So what does the user expect? What do you need? It's really a labyrinth almost, and you can easily get lost, and that means, and we heard a little bit about this, deciding on priorities, it changes completely. This takes us immediately to quality criteria, because those are going to change as well. If you no longer can just count the records you're creating in a day, how do you define quality? How do you define completeness if this is not just a form you're filling in? And this is a simplified version of cataloging mark, I know, but if there is no fixed end, how do you define completeness? So what we need is a culture shift, and again, this is language from the report and from those metadata managers, from pride in production to valuing opportunities to learn, explore, and try new approaches. And again, we need to make time for that by automating some of the standard workflows. And the next slide, if and when it comes up, is about infrastructure. So what kind of infrastructure do we need to manage all of this in the future? What does our future ideal library infrastructure look like? And this group came up with a lot of questions. Should we centralize? Should we decentralize? Do we need something like a library-specific hub for this? And what does an authoritative source look like if you think about equity diversion, if you think about, different types of labeling, if what for the one is an authoritative source, for the other maybe is one that is not trustworthy. How do you go about all this, and what is the role of, for example, Wikidata in all of this? So general purpose hubs. Okay, this is the infrastructure. So in our research, and through about a decade of research, not just theoretical research, but also hands-on work and pilots and so on, what we found at OCLC is that unfortunately there's no easy answer to all these questions, simply because the requirements are very spread out across a continuum. So yes, on the one hand, on the left-hand side, for example, you've got the homogeneous data that you can work with through automated reconciliation, machine matching, there with pretty standard entities like WACs or persons. But then on the other side, and that's basically all of what Julia has talked about, are these collections that are very different, and where you need a decentralized approach, where you need a lot of human intervention, and where we're talking about completely different entities or additional entities, and where the line between object description and context description really is no longer clearly defined. So if we need an infrastructure, we need an infrastructure that supports both of these. We can't do just with one of them and then have these custom applications, and by this we mean, for example, interfaces, so you can build whatever special system you need on top. And we call this knowledge work because this is no longer just describing something, this is creating new knowledge, connecting the dots and really making visible new knowledge. Okay. 2 slides on why we at OCLC think that this needs a library-specific ecosystem. It starts with this topic of knowledge creation that I've just mentioned. Some of the systems out there, such as Wikipedia, for good reasons, have notability criteria, have policies that are geared towards documentation of existing knowledge and not about for knowledge creation. At the same time, libraries have always had very specific policies, very specific views on longevity, very specific views on authoritativeness. So while there is a lot in common with those communities, there are also some concerns that we hear time and again. So how do we navigate this? But there is a more important reason for maybe building your own infrastructure or using a different one, a central one, and that is scale. I mean, if you think about all the libraries in the world and all their collections and all the different objects, and now you're no longer just cataloging at the collection level, but really at the item level, that is massive scale. And we've tried it, and others have tried it, and something like Wikibase, at least today, is just not capable to manage this. And also there's the question of long-term commitment, because again, librarians don't think in terms of decades. We think in 50 years is nothing for us. We want our metadata and our data be there and processable and etc. in 50 years to come, at least. But at the same time, and this is the good news, having a library-specific infrastructure that does what it needs to be doing for us and for our specific policies doesn't mean we have to exclude us from the others. No, quite the contrary. With the quality data that we create in those infrastructures, we can then enrich and feed and populate and link to general purpose hubs. And these could be a Wikidata, this could be an ISNI, this could be whatever it is, including Google. But we're coming from this point of, well, we have worked in our infrastructure, and then we see what we need to share with externally. It's about complementing. So naturally, I need to talk a little bit about what we're doing in this field, and we've built, for the past 2.5 years, we've built something that's called WorldCat entities. It's an infrastructure, but it's also, to date, 150 million data points, entities searchable on this public website. The website is live, and from the day we made this public website live, we are also committing to the persistence of all the identifiers in there. So that's a commitment we're giving today. This is focused on works and persons today. Note also works at the work level. But of course, we're going to extend this with more entities. This is really early days for this endeavor, but it's, we think, the right next step. After 10 years of research, it's the right next step to go into production now. So our next steps are to refine what we've built. We've built a basic editor, we've built APIs, we haven't released them yet. We're going to work with development partners to get that right, to use their real-life projects to see how we're adding value or what else we might need, and then we're taking it from there, and of course you're all invited to follow this development. So in sum, we feel that we believe in the value of libraries, we believe in the value of library cooperation also in the future. We support this cooperation with infrastructure. We've done so for 50+ years, and we have done all this research, and we feel that we understand what it takes to work with next-gen metadata and linked data at scale. And this is why we have developed this infrastructure and are continuing to develop it, to add to the options, and to give libraries one more option to manage, really manage, edit natively next-gen metadata in the future. And of course, we're doing it together with you because we're doing it for you. So this is my quick summary. Sorry for the hiccups, but I hope this gave you a good overview of A, what the general trends are and where we're going, what the challenges are. Hopefully also the feeling that we are not alone in this. We're in this all together. And the challenges you are feeling in your institutions are the challenges that everybody else is feeling, because it's just part of this transformation of the shift. Thank you.